Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's weekly options watch list. Hopefully, you all are having a wonderful weekend and are looking forward to getting back to trading here come Monday. So, before I get into the top 5 plays that I'm looking at for the upcoming week, I actually want to do a market structure kind of breakdown and kind of see where our indices are sitting at and where we could potentially see them go this following week. So, let's start off here with the ES futures. And a few things to be watching here going forward. So we did get this strong selling down into probably like -4 ATR here. We got a reversion, chopped around here for a second, and then continued to flush back down to a -3 with this squeeze firing to that downside. And then to end the week, we had strong buying, looking like we are going to get another reversion back up to this 21 EMA. So what I'm kind of looking out for here in the beginning of the week is to continue this buying up into this 21 EMA so we complete that reversion to the mean. And then from there, I do think we could start to roll over again back down to the downside just due to the overall structure of the market still looking very bearish. So even on the daily time frame, we have negatively stacked EMAs and we're in a deceleration stage. And this histogram is definitely bearish, but the thing that I'm keeping my eye on closely is if we look at this weekly time frame. So we have bearish momentum on the squeeze here. Our price is holding well below that 21 EMA. We no longer have stacked EMAs, and until we reclaim this 21 EMA on that weekly time frame, I will remain bearish. Once we are trading above that, then I will start to be looking more bullish on the market as a whole. But any reversion on the weekly time frame up to this 8 or 21 EMA, I am looking to short stocks from those levels. So definitely be keeping your eye on this weekly time frame, and that's what I'm watching very closely. And another thing to be watching here is this monthly time frame. I've been talking about this for a while now, and finally, exactly what I've been talking about has happened, is that we got this flush all the way down to this 21 monthly EMA, and then it bounced off of that level, which I really like to see, because this is the place that I was looking for the market to find support, and that's exactly what it did. That being said, though, this squeeze histogram is still losing all of its bullish momentum, so we easily could come retest this level once again, and potentially chop around that level as this squeeze histogram kind of loses its momentum, and then it could potentially regain that momentum here in a few months. But as of now, it is looking like it could keep going to the downside and easily retest this 21 EMA on that monthly time frame once again. So that's kind of what I'm looking at on the ES here. Does not mean that it has to happen, but I think that its path of least resistance is still to that downside, with the overall market looking very weak. So going on to the Qs now, we can see that it is a similar story to the ES. You get this rejection of the 21, get the flush, get the reversion, couldn't break out below this -1, gets another reversion quick, but then finally breaks out to the downside as this daily squeeze fires as well. And just like the ES came down to this -3 and is now reverting back up to the 21. And I do think that beginning of the week we get more buying up into that level, and then the end of the week we could start to potentially roll over once again. So just like the ES, we do not have any positive stacked EMAs. We actually have negatively stacked EMAs. Our price is below that 21 EMA, and the structure itself is just looking quite bearish. Now if we come to a weekly time frame as well, very similar story to the ES. Any reversion back up to this 8 EMA, I'm going to look to short quite aggressively, because you can see here the last 3 times it bounced up almost to that 21 even, but basically up to this 8, fell, up to the 8, fell, up to the 8, and fell. So if we get any sort of reversion up to this 8 EMA on the Qs for the weekly time frame, I will be looking to short quite aggressively. Going on now to the Dow. All the indices are basically having a very similar story, other than maybe the small caps. But once again, you get that flush, reversion, flush, and looks like we're starting to get that reversion again. And I'll be looking again for that flush. Here as well, if we come to that weekly time frame, very similar story here. We're trading below this 21, and if we get any reversion up to that 21, it'll be a great place to start to short, because once again here, you get this push up to 21, rejected, 21, rejected, 21, rejected. So if this the next week's candle can get back up there, it should, not saying it has to, but it should reject that level once again, because it has been doing that same thing in the past. All right, last but not least, here is the small caps, which have been just getting absolutely obliterated. So if we come down here, we can see that large flush, reversion, got the flush, but this one actually now has closed above the 21 EMA on the daily time frame. We still do have negatively stacked EMAs, but this is definitely something I want to keep my eye on, is if we can get a few more closes above this level, it may start to kind of loop this daily squeeze and start to fire to the upside potentially. But the overall market on these small caps is still quite bearish, because if we look at the weekly time frame, we can see that we had this fall all the way down to about the -3 ATR with this weekly squeeze firing. But if this weekly squeeze can start to show some yellow bars, that daily squeeze might be the thing that propels it back up to potentially this 21 EMA for it to retest. So that's kind of what I'm watching on the small caps, is that we may start to get this reversion up to the weekly 21 EMA, and from that level, that may be a good place to then short. Or if it can recapture that, this might start to be the change in trend for the small caps, which may start making moves back up to the upside. But time will tell. All right, now going on to the 5 plays that I'm watching for the upcoming week. A few of them to the upside, majority of them to the downside due to the overall market structure. But the first one here is going to be AMAT. So if we come take a look at this one, we can see we have negatively stacked EMAs. Our price action is holding below this 21 EMA, and looks like we're getting this reversion. Our histogram is below that 0 line, and I do think that with the rest of the market, if we do get the rest of that reversion up to the mean, that we could start to see stocks roll over once again, and that's exactly what I think could happen here with AMAT, is that we could see this reversion up to the mean and more falling. Next one here is going to be JD, also to that downside. So similar story here, we have negatively stacked DMAs. Our squeeze histogram is actually bearish, and we're holding below this 21 EMA and have not been able to reclaim it. So definitely look for an entry right around that 21 EMA, and then look for a fall probably back down to these previous lows to retest would be a good place for me to kind of see JD fall back down to. Next one here is MO to the upside. So in case the market does start to creep back up to the upside and we start regaining some bullish structure, I do want to have a few plays that are also to the upside just in case. So we have our positively stacked EMAs. We're in a nice acceleration stage, and we have bullish momentum on the squeeze histogram with it above that 0 line. And our price action has been holding this 21 EMA. Here it was holding it perfectly. We had kind of a sell-off here, but it looks to have filled that gap quite nicely. Refilled that very quick, actually. So I think we could see a continuation to the upside here on MO going forward. NVDA here is the next one to the downside. So if we look at the structure here, we can see that our squeeze histogram is barely above the 0, and I think we easily could fall into some bearish momentum on that. We do not have any stacked EMAs, and we're also in a deceleration stage. So my ideal entry is going to be a reversion all the way up to this 21 EMA, which is around 245. And if we get that, I think that would be a good area to start to short NVIDIA and look for a fall back down to this previous support here at these lows. I think that'd be a great place to take profits right around, what is that, 208, 210. Yeah, I think that'd be a good area to then secure some profits on that one if it does start to roll over again. And then last but not least here is Oxy to the upside. So energy as a whole has been kind of an outlier in this market, showing a lot of relative strength compared to a lot of the other sectors. And I think that it could potentially still show some strength here going forward. And one of the main ones I'm going to be watching within that is Oxy. So we have our positively stacked DMAs. We got this daily squeeze setting up here. Our histogram is still above that zero line, which I like to see. And then our price action is holding that 21 EMA here very nicely. So I think I'll give this one a few more days to kind of let this squeeze develop, but I still think that an entry around this 21 EMA is ideal, and look for a push back up to these previous highs in order to take profits at those levels. So this is the weekly watch list. Hopefully it gives you all a few other stocks and a few things to look at on the indices as a whole. And let's go out there on Monday and start making some money, everybody.